feel that connection to everybody. It's a great way to start. So lovely to see you all. How wonderful to have this Dharma connection, to come together, to rejoice in this special moment that we have to explore the Dharma together, explore these magnificent teachings that Drupon Khenpo is giving to us, and to get to explore it all together. So I really appreciate all of you for showing up and bringing yourselves here. So to begin with, we'll just say the refuge and bodhicitta prayer, and then we'll move right into the meditation. In the Buddha, his teaching, and the fellowship most excellent, I take my refuge until enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other transcendent virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all that lives. In the Buddha, his teaching, and the fellowship most excellent, I take my refuge until enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other transcendent virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all that lives. In the Buddha, his teaching, and the fellowship most excellent, I take my refuge until enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other transcendent virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all that lives. So, to begin with, we'll start with the meditation, and today's meditation will be based primarily on what Drupon Khenpo taught on Sunday, which is to say the practice of reversing our fixated attachment, our obsession, our reification to samsaric states. And of course, this builds on the previous practices that Drupon Khenpo went into more extensively, namely reversing the fixated attachment to the things of this life, right? So there's definitely a progression to these stages. Doesn't mean we have to have perfected the first before we move on to the next, but it does help us to understand how these build. So I will lead us through it. So to begin with, simply just take a moment to take your seat, to come into the present moment, to feel your embodiment here and now. Feel the earth below you supporting you, and all this spaciousness around us, the spaciousness which connects us and which allows us, gives us room to be here in our particular manifestation at this day and time, however we are, really allowing ourselves and allowing our energy. So take a minute to sense and to arrive. And then we can begin with some shamatha meditation, some tranquility meditation, where we're just allowing the breath, the inhalation and exhalation to be the focus of our awareness, so that we're cultivating that one-pointed attention that's both alert yet calm, resting one pointedly on the flow of the breath. So let's just practice like that for a couple minutes. And now, in this calm, alert state of awareness, we'll move into the meditative inquiry, working with our fixated attachment to samsaric states. And the way that we can do this is by simply starting to explore how, when we die, even if we attain a positive rebirth in the human or deva realms, where things are predominantly feeling good, how those states are still nevertheless subject to this endless cycle of experiences of discontent, of dukkha, and which we generally react to through feelings of aversion, attachment, or apathy. And then acting on those produces karma, karmic seeds that will in the future ripen into more experiences of dukkha, of discontent, which then produces more feelings of attachment, aversion, and apathy, and so forth. So even if we attain a higher realm rebirth, we are not free. That higher realm rebirth will inevitably come to an end when its karmic causes are exhausted, and we'll have to face the next ripening of karma without choice at that point. So in your meditative inquiry, explore this description of how life and death continues for beings. explore your relation to it, your feeling. And in particular, explore if it is possible to be free from this involuntary, compulsory cycling through birth, aging, illness, death, rebirth, aging, illness, death. So just explore like that for next 5 minutes or so.
as we go through these guided meditative inquiries, we get a bit of a sense of the kind of slow internal dialogue that we are engaging in when we're doing meditative inquiry individually. It can be very helpful to go back and forth between individual and group practice to keep that practice fresh. The intention with the meditative inquiry is for there be engagement with our own experience and the prajna, the precise knowledge that is the embodiment of the Buddha and the Buddha's teachings. So I find that when we develop a sense of that meditative inquiry as a relationship that we're creating with the teachings and with the Buddha, and something that we're cultivating over time, it can be very rich and helpful in progressing. So this is our last discussion group for this series of teachings. We don't want to spend a lot of time talking so that there's opportunity for everyone to ask questions if they have them. So we'll go ahead and open those up. Drupon Khenpo is definitely giving us a sense of the import of these teachings. One of the ways that this term degrees of spiritual maturity is translated sometimes is scope, because it gives you the sense of, as he was describing last time, the practice is not terribly different. It's still ethical discipline. There's still a view of breaking that cycle of addiction, as he said in response to one of the questions, the addiction to this life, the addiction to samsara, the addiction to our own benefit, and just not knowing how to attain Buddhahood. Those are the four obstacles that Drupon Khenpo described as the reason why, if we have Buddha nature, we're not spontaneously manifesting our Buddha nature. First, attachment or reification of this life, reification of samsara as a whole, attachment to our own individual liberation, and just not knowing how to accomplish Buddhahood. And these degrees of spiritual maturity or scopes are literally that. They're a widening of our perspective through practice, so that the techniques that Drupon Khenpo really spent a lot of time, he was so detailed in describing that initial degree of spiritual maturity, because those same techniques are what we're going to be doing in the later degrees to some extent. The main difference is that the perspective is widened, not just this life, but samsara as a whole, not just samsara as a whole, but even individual nirvana and so forth. So you get a sense of a spectrum or a continuum of practice, a thread that's running through our practice from the moment we start engaging in Dharma all the way to Buddhahood. So I think I'll leave it there unless Zopa has something to add, and see if there are any questions.
At the end of his...
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I forgot to raise my hand or
You're
something.
fine.
Huh?
You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. At the end of this last teaching, where he elaborated on the second line of the four Dharmas of Gampopa, he explained that the Dharma becoming the path is this mindset that urgently seeks liberation that is authentic, unfabricated, and effortless in character. I, have, when I hear that word, for example, unfabricated, I have a little bit of resistance to it, because I often, everything I think or whatever, everything coming out of my mind seems fabricated. And same thing with the word effortless, effortless, I mean, is it possible, is that really possible, given that we're in, where we are in this, I'm sorry, I function in this conventional level of reality. And for me, it seems like a big reach to I don't, what is, am I capable of really experiencing what unfabricated is, or truly effortless is? I suppose it's something that arises from meditation, but can you elaborate on that, or clarify, or something or other? You understand my question?
I definitely understand it.
Okay.
I think it's a great question. And I'll tell you the secret.
Okay.
Is your desire fabricated? Do you have to put effort into your desire or into your anger? We don't,
No.
right?
Yeah.
It comes up naturally.
Right.
It's so easy. We don't have to train in it. Right? And why is that? It's only because of habituation.
Okay.
It's because of believing in it, right? So the answer is yes, definitely. We can have the unfabricated, effortless yearning, one-pointed yearning for liberation. And how do we get that? By putting in effort, by fabricating, by making ourselves think about it, by doing the practice, by working, putting in the effort is how we get it to become effortless, right? Again, all of this in some ways relates back to our idea of self, right? We think, I am this way and I will continue to be this way, instead of recognizing that it's a change, that what we put effort into now becomes effortless in the future.
So another thing to note about that is that when Drupon Khenpo was explaining that, those adjectives, the effortless, the unfabricated, and so forth, they're describing that experiential understanding that comes up in the meditation.
Right.
And meditation, the Tibetan word for meditation literally means to habituate. So one everyday world kind of way to understand what's happening in this meditative inquiry is we are counteracting the habit of ignorance with the habit of prajna. So we've had this very instilled habit of ignorance. For example, how many of us were born knowing how to drive? Nobody. But everybody who knows how to drive doesn't really think about what they're doing. After a while, the habit, the habituation to pushing down on the pedal, braking, using the steering wheel is so strong that it is effortless, unfabricated. Another word to use is spontaneous. Lisa, if I hand you chocolate cake, is your response spontaneous? Something nice from Three Sisters down at Boda.
Dark chocolate.
So basically, we have the habit of ignorance. And the reason this listening, contemplating, and meditating is so important is it's allowing us to integrate prajna, precise knowledge, which is the direct antagonist of ignorance. So for example, any habit that you can think of, if you're trying to kick smoking, if you're trying to go to the gym, any habit you want to cultivate, one of the first things that we're told is don't just try to drop a bad habit, but actually encourage a positive habit in its place. Just dropping smoking cold turkey is very difficult. Whereas if we start to use those cravings as a prompt for a positive activity, go out for a walk or whatever it might be, then we're actually weakening the old habit as the positive habit is being strengthened. Eventually, we don't even feel that urge anymore. It's effortless. That's what effortless and unfabricated means. It means it's been habituated to the utmost, to the point that it's ingrained, just like driving, and we don't really think about what we're doing. It feels very automatic and so forth. Does that address the question, Lisa? You're muted.
Yes, thank you very much. Both your answers were very perfect.
Oh,
and
good.
clarifying for me. Yeah, thank you.
I love your question, Lisa, because I think that that's a tendency we all have. We're like, why do I have to put all this effort into it? But we've forgotten all the effort we've put into all of the things that we're not crazy about in this life, much less all the habit of that deep-seated ignorance, which is described as co-emergent. It arises at the same time as wisdom, which I always found very powerful. You know, why, if our wisdom's always there, and it would have to be if it's not created sometime down the road, why not? Why doesn't it peek through sometimes? And the answer is it does peek through, but the habit of the ignorance that occurs at the same time is cloaking it. So a lot of the practice, you'll hear Drupon Khenpo talk about purifying obscurations. A lot of it is about removing those veils so that we can see what's been there all along.
And sort of building this kind of trust or something, you know, where, you know, rather than doubting, you know, that kind of doubt, right, you know.
Beautiful. You are rocking. Definitely. There's an element of trust, and people always feel like, you know, why, I don't know about these negative realms, and it's fine to have these questions. We should have these questions. Our culture is not one that necessarily has all of these depictions. To the extent it does have depictions of hells, we may have rejected them in our life. But the question eventually becomes, are you going to trust your ignorance or the Buddha's wisdom more? Which way are you going? And it's just something that we don't have to sign on, but just enough, as Drupon Khenpo was saying with the flashlight, just enough to see the next step and trust that the Buddha wouldn't be saying these things unless there's a useful lesson for us and something to gain, something that will lead us forward. Wonderful questions.
Go ahead, Gauri.
Thank you for the opportunity. I want to join Lisa in thanking for all the golden nuggets I received from you, from Zopa and Yeshe. There's so much to ponder upon. Thank you. My question is two parts. One is a Dharma nature, and the other one is administrative nature. Let me ask the administrative one. If I am not mistaken, there are going to be 2 more days of teaching. And if we have questions after receiving the teachings, as today I came to know is the last discussion, is there a way to approach, ask, take your help to clarify? That's my first question, of more of an administrative nature.
Great.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll just address that real quick. So the tomorrow is actually the last teaching that Drupon Khenpo is giving in this series on the 4 dharmas. So so tomorrow morning will be the last teaching on this series. And Yeshe and I are always happy to help. We love Dharma discussions. We kind of geek out on it, so it's what we enjoy doing. As you can see in the chat, Yeshe just put on the link to book, sessions, online sessions with either one of us. that we make available through our website. So we love talking about Dharma, and if you have specific questions, particularly around these teachings or how to practice them or things like that, we're very happy to help. So please feel free to do that.
Oh, thank you. Okay, the second question is, I think let Dharma become the path. It's more this ignorance goes more subtle and subtle ignorance. We try to get free from those ignorance. And so, yeah, I should say first mention this. So klesha has three flavors, attachment and aversion and apathy. So the more the ignorance level goes down, are we going to be more apathetic? Or in other words, the more apathy I am, I'm less ignorant.
I see.
So that's my question. I want to keep a measure of my ignorance level, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Can I take that? That one's easy.
Yeah, go for it.
All of our ignorance level is bottomless. No, not bottomless, nearly bottomless, let's say. It's not entirely bottomless, and it's actually not even an amount. It's more the habit of that ignorance that you could quantify, how dense the habit is. So in one way, we could just, it's not really worth trying to count how much ignorance. Why? Because all of the qualities of Buddha nature, wisdom, fearlessness, courage, compassion, loving kindness, all these wonderful qualities are always stronger. The habituation, as we were talking about with Lisa's question, is what makes them feel not as strong or not as habituated to them. We don't have as immediate access, but we don't have to worry so much about how much ignorance versus knowledge. Then I'll let Zopa talk about the ignorance versus apathy question. And I've put some of the Tibetan words in the chat for those interested.
Yeah, so I mean, apathy, as Yeshe also mentioned in the chat, right? Timuk, right? Delusion, apathy. So apathy really is the sense of not caring, right? We don't particularly feel strongly one way or another about whatever it may be, about a person we see on the street, about a feeling that we're having, about the environment, whatever. We can be apathetic. And actually, apathy is the direct opposite in many ways of precise knowing, right? So when we know our inner connection, then we're anything but apathetic, right? So the more that we remove our ignorance, it's not that we're becoming like a perfect neutral slate in the sense of not feeling strongly one way or another, is that we feel very strongly about compassion. We feel very strongly about our connection. We feel very strongly about wisdom. It breaks our hearts that beings are Buddhas by nature, and yet they don't recognize it, and so they're suffering. So as our ignorance diminishes, our apathy also diminishes.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps, Gauri.
Oh, yes. So I have a long way to go.
And you're also right there. It's your nature. Buddhahood is the nature of all of us. It's not somewhere else.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Drupon Khenpo mentioned the cyclic existence that when we get to the point of rebirth, we're in kind of we're caught in a cycle of rebirths. And if I understood well, he said that we go from peak cycle in God's realm or Deva's realms. But it seems like my understanding was that it is automatic. We will go back to hell realms and then start climbing back again, and then it's going to go down again. It's that cyclic existence that he spent quite a bit of time on. And my impression was that, so whatever I do in terms of building good karma and eradicating my bad karma I may have accumulated, it seems that cyclic existence dominates, recycling of the existence dominates everything, and it doesn't matter if I eradicate bad karma from the past, because I'm going to go through the cyclic of going down into hell realm after being in the Deva realm. And so is it possible? Does my question make sense, first of all? And then I'd be curious to hear about this. Thank you so much.
Sure.
It makes a lot of sense. All of these questions are definitely an example of the precise knowledge coming from contemplation. You've really looked at the teachings, you've been listening, and you've been really thinking about them. You wouldn't have these questions without processing what you've been hearing. So first of all, I just want to say it makes perfect sense. And it's not just it's perfect sense. This is the practice. These questions, these bringing things to light, these removing doubts, that's the practice. So I'm going to put in the chat the names for things. So peak of cyclic existence is the name for, we have the desire, form, and formless realms. Each of those also has a lot of subsets. So the highest of the highest of the formless realm is this state called the peak of cyclic existence. And the lowest of the hell realms is called ceaseless torment. And yes, like Drupon Khenpo was saying, is there's an inexorable link. That doesn't mean that you can know ahead of time what's going to happen at the end of any given life, because we don't just have negative karma. We also have positive karma that can overcome the negative. But more importantly, this is very similar to a question someone asked about what I call the whatabouts. Whenever there's something that we're not crazy about in the teaching, we have a question that starts, what about this? What about that? And it's not necessarily even a question because it's mostly just, I'm not comfortable with this. And this particular what about people who are naturally good and they genuinely want to do good for people? And the implied question is, what happens to them? Or isn't that good enough? So that's similar to what you're asking here. And Drupon Khenpo really hit it on the head for the question you're asking. He said, yeah, that there's definitely a possibility that alone will be sufficient for a positive rebirth, but it's not as stable. So when we're listening to all these degrees of spiritual maturity, Drupon Khenpo keeps talking about the motivation to the aim for future lives, the aim for being free of samsara, the aim for overcoming our own personal liberation. And that motivation is the critical piece, because it's like the trajectory, the force behind the bullet that actually moves things in a particular trajectory instead of being random. Otherwise, what you described is it. It's totally random. Maybe we get a good, favorable rebirth because we happen to have that karma come forward at the time of death. And maybe at the end of that life, it's a negative one. And that's why samsara is korawa, this cycle, this cyclic existence, because it just keeps going. Another example they use that's very vivid is if you have a bee, or when I was a little kid, we used to get fireflies and put them in a jar so we could see them. And they're just buzzing around in there. So that's another, it's not even like it's a nice smooth circle. It's a crazy random cyclic existence. And that's the norm. That's why since time without time, we've been doing this. And it's that trajectory, that motivation of, at the very least, more than just the things of this life. And then beyond that, not just future lives, but liberation from samsara. And then beyond that, not just liberation from samsara, but Buddhahood, so that I can be a benefit to all beings. This is why that motivation is so absolutely important. It's what takes all of the positive karma and gives it thrust to keep us moving in a direction of continually more strong Dharma practice and opportunity. And is what keeps, literally, when they talk about refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the protection is from falling into those negative rebirths. It's kind of the net that keeps us in the positive experiences that allow us to continue progressing along the path. But that motivation is a key element. It's the thing we have in our hands. Does that help?
Yeah, I particularly like the analogy of the fireflies.
Allez.
Yeah. But this also brings to me a quick other question. For bodhisattvas who choose to remain in samsara, to keep working at saving all the beings, are they in that cyclic thing?
Great question. So realized bodhisattvas, once they've achieved the first bhumi, or also known as the path of seeing from among the 5 paths, that's when a practitioner, a being, has a direct realization of emptiness, right? Not just an experience, but directly realizes it in an unmediated way. Then they are no longer bound by, like the rest of us, by compulsively adopting the skandhas of the next rebirth, right? So it's by the force of their intention to benefit others that they take rebirth, and they're driven by their insight into what is going to be of most benefit to beings, how they're, and that's part of their path, part of their practice. And but they do not, they're not forced into the next rebirth without any say in the matter. So they are liberated. Once you achieve the path of seeing, you are liberated from karma, kleshas, dukkha, karma, kleshas, dukkha, birth, death, rebirth in a involuntary fashion.
Yeah, and I think another way to understand that is to contrast the bodhisattva realization and the arhat realization. So the arhat is free of samsara, but has completely eradicated all what's called the klesha obscuration. I'm going to put these in the chat. Those are the 2 obscurations, the klesha or emotional obscuration and the cognitive obscuration. So the arhat has completely eliminated all karma and kleshas, which is what keeps us stuck in samsara. That means that even if the arhat's mind says, oh, I wish I'd stayed in samsara and been of more benefit to beings, it is physically impossible to be reborn in samsara. And remember, samsara is not a place. Drupon Khenpo was saying it's not this thing around us. Samsara is the misperception of this thing around us. It's mind's ignorance, mind's misperception. Once you've eradicated all the karma and kleshas, that particular misperception does not happen. The difference is that bodhisattvas have eliminated all but what's called the subtle klesha, obscuration. It's like it's often described as like the trace of karma and kleshas. It's just enough to choose a rebirth among all of us, but not so much that it's involuntary like us, which is why bodhisattvas can choose to be born at a certain time or a certain place or a certain realm. So yes, they are in cyclic existence, but they do not suffer from the misperception of it. So they do not have the same experience that we have, where this looks real. This looks absolutely real to me. I'm like Lisa, I'm stuck in this conventional reality kind of view at the moment. This all looks very real to me. If I had the realization of even the first level of a bodhisattva, I would be seeing this, and at the same time being able to realize its emptiness. Or actually at that out of meditation would be having the understanding of emptiness. The only state that has the non-dual experience of appearance and their emptiness at once is Buddhahood. This gets very elaborate.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. This is very beautiful, and the text entering the middle way goes to lots of details of all the different levels of the bodhisattva realizations and the differences and so forth.
So I think it's super helpful, especially now as we're coming to the end of these teachings by Drupon Khenpo. Having a framework of what he's teaching and the view of the path is such an invaluable aid to us in terms of being able to plug not just these teachings on the four dharmas, but any teachings that we're receiving in, so we know for ourselves how they fit in the path. Right? And part of that just emerges by by doing more studies, more engaging with the ocean of teachings. But for instance, we can look at it and we can say, okay, I know that the steps are that Drupon Khenpo has been teaching are, first we have to reverse the fixated attachment, the reification on this life. That's shared in common to all the paths in Buddhism, right? So looking beyond that, and then we recognize, okay, the next stumbling block is, okay, well, yeah, I must get a good rebirth, right? So we feel that very strongly, and it's important to feel that very strongly. It's important to go through this process where we're like, could I bear being born as an animal? Could I bear being born as a hungry ghost? Could I bear the sufferings of the hell realms? No, I really couldn't. And I strongly want to make sure that doesn't happen. But then we recognize, okay, even if I'm reborn as a human or a deva, it's still the same situation, right? I'm not free, right? The second step. So where we start to not just be so focused on getting a good rebirth, but also getting liberated. And then, so that's the second step. But then when we look at liberation, even that alone is not enough, because what good is my own happiness and benefit alone if all these other beings who have been so kind to me, who are so dear to me, are also suffering, right? Isn't that a form of hell, right? If I feel fine, but all these beings that I care so deeply for are suffering, right? So then that's the next step, right? So Drupon Khenpo in these teachings is really taking us through not just the intellectual understanding, but the experiential understanding of how we build up in the progressive stages in ourselves, which in many ways goes back to Lisa's question, right? It goes back to this sense of, okay, it feels like it does take effort, right? And there's nothing wrong with it taking effort. We need to put in the effort now. But by doing so, then it becomes more and more natural, right? We're so fixated in our culture and time and age on being competent that we feel like, oh, if the teachings say it has to be effortless, it has to be spontaneous, and we look inside ourselves and we're like, it's not effortless, it's not spontaneous, maybe I should just give up. But that's not what the teachings are saying, right? It becomes effortless by putting in effort. It becomes natural to us by habituating ourselves to it.
Another way we can think about it is that we've basically been rolling the dice at the end of every life, infinite times. And these teachings are teaching us how to load the dice so that next time we roll them, it's going to come up exactly what we want. 7s and 11s all the way through.
Go ahead, Gowrie. Gowrie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I forgot to mute. I forgot to unmute, sorry. Yeah, I have a question which is not directly related to the teachings that we are receiving. I hope you can, if you don't want to answer my question, I can understand, but I want to get a broader context. Are you able, you're not able to hear me?
I can hear you. You're a little quiet, but I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is my question. As I said, it's not very directly related to the teaching. If I understand, both of you have underwent 3-year, 3-month, 3-day, 3-week, 3-day retreat, and you had that in Pulihare, I believe, in that monastery. So I want to, if you can elaborate on your experience, what it entails and what sort of training we go through in this retreat. I want to understand before I can start contemplating how I can incorporate that kind of training in my life.
Beautiful. We actually did our 3-year retreat, as Yeshe put in the chat, at the Vajra Vidya Retreat Center, which is in Crestone, Colorado, which is one of Trungpa Rinpoche's retreat centers, under the guidance of Khenpo Jigme and Khenpo Lobsang. And yeah, we have so much to say about 3-year retreats, so I'm trying to keep it brief, but it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful practice. It's very intense. I would encourage anybody that's interested in the possibility of doing it to certainly go in that direction, and at the same time, 3-year retreat was primarily developed to help people train in the spectrum of teachings that are important to the lineage. There's a lot of switching between different practices. So it's not the only way to have really intensive retreat experience, but it's one of the best ways. Yeshe, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I loved Gauri's question about how do you move in that direction? How do you go there? And what do you do when you're there? So how you move in that direction is you listen, you contemplate, and you meditate. And that's building more and more of this groundswell of confidence in the teachings and facility in the teachings. I remember very well, very early in our teaching, it might have been in the first month or so asking Khenpo Jigme, our retreat master, what do you think what do you get out of 3-year retreat? What's the point? And he said, making your mind more flexible. And I was like, what? But he's absolutely right. Our minds are so rigid from believing everything to be concrete and having this dualistic relationship with all of these things that do not exist the way they seem to, and believing that relationship and just having that get more and more intense. And 3-year retreat was devised that the amount of time is, we started calling it 3 years, 3 fortnights. In Tibetan, it means 3 years and 3 halves, 3 faces, not phases, but faces like your face of the moon. So it ends up being 6 weeks. And the reason for that is that's the amount of time for the subtle winds in the body to have the ability to completely clear out and purify. It's not a guarantee like everything else, but it's the minimum time for that to happen. And then what happens in 3-year retreat, a lot of it, guess what? You get to be able to do that right now. It starts out with all of these things that we're working with right now. It's not, Drupon Khenpo is not just pulling the wool over your eyes. First thing we do when we go into 3-year retreat is sit there and contemplate the impermanence in the form of our own mortality, karma, the deficiencies of samsara, the pricelessness of this human existence. And we spend a great deal of time listening and contemplating that, and especially meditating for the first portion of the retreat. And after that are in the Karma Kagyu Nundro, after that is in the Karma Kagyu retreat, what follows is the Nundro practices. So the prostrations, Vajrasattva, Mandala, and Guru Yoga. And then from there, it can vary a little bit from retreat to retreat, but generally they're the main Yidam practices of the lineage, as well as shamatha and vipassana, and a lot of hard work, just everyday hard work, mahakala practice, group practice. But at the end of the retreat, I think he was completely right. Your mind becomes workable. You are in the hands of Dharma, leading you this way and that, instead of ignorance leading you this way and that. The one thing I would probably add to what he said is I have a very strong experience after 3-year retreat that there's something very valuable to people who are, we hear this phrase, I hold the lineage, when we do the Vajradhara lineage prayer. I hold a lineage. And there really is this sense of Dharma is not something that exists in a vacuum. It exists in our minds. And the purpose of 3-year retreat is to instill the Dharma in our mind so that we become containers, living containers of the Dharma. And 3-year retreat is only one way to do that. We all have the opportunity to do that by listening, contemplating, and meditating.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Beautiful question. Thank you. Martha.
Here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Oh, good. Most of what Drupon Khenpo says just sounds completely right to me when I hear it. Completely, yes, that's it. I hadn't thought of that before, but that's it. But this one part that he gave in the last talk, the last teaching, just left me puzzled or wondering. He talked about subtle and coarse awareness of impermanence, and described that as the awareness in a coarse level, or what he calls a rough level, awareness that death will come. Have just complete awareness of that, complete recognition of that. Then the subtle impermanence is our more, he says that it's moment by moment, which seems truly like the practice to me. And then after saying that, he says, but the more important is the coarse awareness of impermanence. And that just, I didn't know how to put those two together, because I would have thought that real continuous practice of the of not, let's say, not clinging or not conceptualizing, something like that, I don't know, would be more to the point.
Mm.
So I'm so curious about what tell me more, please.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, course impermanence, right? As we understand it, the way we think about it is like, okay, I live my life and then I die, and we're like, oh, death is the ending. Whereas subtle impermanence is when we start to work with subtle impermanence, we recognize that in every moment it's changing, right? It's not like life is a thing that you have and then death happens all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
The more that we work with subtle impermanence, the more that we start to recognize that even right now, even as I'm enjoying something, the very act of enjoying it is the experience of its ending. There's no way to enjoy something that we like without it ending, moment by moment, right? And so that is, and both of those are super important. But as usual with the Dharma, I think it's so important to take in the context, right? The context of the teaching. So, I mean, my understanding of what Drupon Khenpo was saying about the course impermanence being the important one, I mean, of course, they're both important, but working with course impermanence is because if we don't, it's really that recognition that we're going to die, that we're not free. We're not free just to choose to remain in this life, to choose to remain with these friends, to choose to have this enjoyment and have it keep going, right? We don't have that power, right? And that is one of those like fundamental shifts that really turns our mind to Dharma, that produces the disillusionment with our normal habitual way of going about life, thinking, oh, this is so important, I have to get this promotion, I have to get this job, I have to get this relationship, I have to do this X, Y, and Z, and then I'll be happy. Because when we have that recognition of course impermanence, I'm going to die, these things are not going to last, right? I can't take them with me. That's that like gut punch that really spurs along our practice. So I don't think, my interpretation wasn't so much that he was saying, that the working with the subtle impermanence isn't as important, but in terms of helping us particularly address that first hindrance, right? The fixated attachment on this life as being the only thing, the meaningful thing, the most important thing, then it's really that course impermanence that is the most important.
Also, as Zopa said, the context is really critical. And he was using coarse and subtle impermanence to help us understand. Impermanence is what he was describing, how impermanence is the way to understand this pervasive suffering of conditioned existence, the subtlemost of the three sufferings. So in order to really see why we don't normally perceive the pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. If you look at those three sufferings, the kinds of suffering that the Buddha talked about, obvious suffering or suffering of suffering, that's a negative feeling. The suffering of change or shifting suffering is ironically a pleasurable feeling. That chocolate cake, that pleasure of the chocolate cake is shifting suffering. Even as you're eating, and it feels good, it's already shifting. If you kept eating that chocolate cake, what happens? we haven't gotten to that point where that shift has turned into obvious suffering, but it's already moving there. So the obvious suffering is an unpleasant feeling. Shifting suffering is a pleasant feeling. Pervasive suffering is a neutral feeling. How in the world are we going to perceive a neutral feeling? The example is that the pervasive suffering for ordinary beings is like having an eyelash on your palm. And for bodhisattvas, it's like having an eyelash in your eye. How do you perceive it? Through this understanding of impermanence, both subtle and coarse. And there it's very important. The coarse one's very important because, as you say, that subtle impermanence is moment to moment, really being able to track the shift of your mind moment to moment. If there's no end to that subtle moment to moment, that's exactly what happens at Buddhahood. It's not like Buddhahood is a solid, permanent, single, autonomous self. There is no permanent, single, autonomous self, not in Buddha nature, not in Buddhahood, not in us. Buddhahood also is changing moment to moment. The difference is there's no coarse end point. It's a stream that's just changing. Another way we could think of it is the stream going over the cliff into the waterfall, as opposed to a stream that just indefinitely continues. The problem is that fall, that cutting off at death, and the inability that moment to moment impermanence is inexorably moving towards that end. Without that end, so what? Everything's changing moment to moment. It's been changing moment to moment forever, and it's never going to stop changing moment to moment. That's impermanence. The difference is that samsara is the deathly state. Nirvana is the deathless. There's no end.
Oh, thank you both so much. Puts it together.
Yay, that's a great question, Martha.
That's a fantastic question because it is a very subtle point, which is why he spent a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
You guys really
you
do
both.
your homework. I love it.
Okay, it's a little after 7, so we should dedicate the merit that's come from this listening, contemplating, and meditating that we've done together, and share it freely with all beings so that all beings may enjoy the nature of their own mind, the deathless state of nirvana, of Buddhahood. Having attained omniscience by this merit, may I defeat the enemy wrongdoing and liberate all beings from this ocean of suffering with its surging waves of birth, aging, illness, and death. Thank you all so much. So, of course, if anyone has to leave, please feel free. Yeshe and I will stick around in case there's more of this juicy discussion to continue with. And otherwise, we will see you all tomorrow, hopefully, for our final teachings.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've just
Thank you.
say that I have learned so much from the two of you.
Oh,
So much. And I've just been listening, but you really explain things so clearly and precisely. I've been around for a long time, and you've added nuance to things that I've known before, that make it clear. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you,
You're
Suzanne.
so welcome. Thank you.
That's really the blessing of Pulahari and Drupon Khenpo, and
The
we
lineage
we
for
try
you.
to channel that.
Well, you do. Thank you.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you.
Mhm.
One thing I did want to say, because people mentioned the podcast that we do, it's called Prajna Sparks. And this last one is very much based on these teachings that Drupon Khenpo is giving on life and death. So for those of you who want to see more of that, the way we do the podcast is also based on listening, contemplating, and meditating. There's a short talk, a little bit of questions, and Zopa does a guided meditation. And we'll probably be doing topics based on these teachings for some time. Thank you all for being here. Martha, it's such a delight to see you. It's been too long.
Thank you. Thank you. I know.
We
I
can't
know, I'm
see
so
anybody
glad.
during the teachings because the webinar format isn't like this where you could see people. So it's just wonderful to actually see your faces.
Thank you, everybody. Oh, goodness. What amazing teachings. I'm just blown out of the water.
He's incredible.
Drupon Khenpo is unbelievable.
Yep.
I
Really.
can't wait to go back to Bodhanath and see
Oh.
everybody and have more teachings from him. He's phenomenal.
He is
I feel
incredible.
so blessed.
Yep.
Yes.
Gauri, did you have another question, or anybody else?
I had to remember to unmute myself. Okay, is there a way to download these
Sorry.
discussion recordings? Is there a way to download the recordings? I tried and tried. Maybe I'm missing it, or there's no way to do it. I would love to listen to it only another 1,000 times. Is there a way to do it before the deadline?
I'm afraid that we can't, the monastery prefers that they be streamed on the web, so you can listen to them as much as you want, but you have to go to the website, or you can get the YouTube link from the website and just listen as you're connected. There isn't a way to download them.
But it's going to, it's available only through May 30th. Isn't that correct?
At the moment, yes, but that might be extended.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Excuse me. Hi.
Hey, Myron.
Hey, I'm at a doctor's office, so that's why I'm wearing a mask. And I just wanted to echo everybody's statement that it's been really fantastic. You guys really got a good handle and a presentation on the Dharma. I like the way you cook, and I can eat forever.
We're all
We love
cooking
having you
together.
for dinner.
So I really don't have any questions. The only problem I'm having, I don't know if it's a problem. I used to be involved with a group called Ekankar, where they believed in taking everything in when you're sleeping. So I'll be watching the podcasts again, the streaming again. But your discussion group is very clear and brings the memory back of what the essence of the teachings were on these different days. So it's been really wonderful. And the question is, or is he going to be doing the rest of this? Are we going to have him 4 dharmas, the other 2, 3, 4 dharmas, all 4? Come on.
He'll get to them.
We'll see what he does tomorrow.
Okay. So
In many ways, it is like, just like he was saying, I don't remember if it was on Sunday or last week, but just he spent so much time on the first Dharma because it really is, it's so crucial to us, right?
Right.
That is where we can focus our attention, right?
Well, that's where we're all stuck. Yeah, we're all stuck there now.
Yeah.
And in many ways, like he said, once you have that, the other ones will follow. It's an opening process. that doesn't work with samsara. You can't just kind of say, okay, I'll just do the best I can, and eventually it'll just open up for me. That's not quite how it works. But that first dharma is critical because it has the propelling force to take us through the others. As he said, it's not that different. It's just a matter of our mind starting to get more flexible, to get a little less tight. And then naturally it's like, hey, it's not just this life. The next life's also going to have the same situation. And then not just that, but so how about nirvana? And so it just, the trajectory does have an organic impetus to it. So that first one is critical. Once we have that one, we're golden. We'll get there.
Yeah, I think things start bubbling up once you get past that first one, and appearing on their own, so that's good.
Yes.
Yeah, and then it reminds me a little bit of one of the quotes of Jamgon Kundro Lodro Tai says, overcoming that fixation with this life is 50% of the path. So.
Yeah, and it's like you're halfway there. Again, for our dualistic mind is like taking out the measuring tape. What do you mean halfway? When there's 5 paths, and that's just the first one. There's still, but halfway there means you got that. Then you've got the steam.
First part of the path you have to climb up. After a certain part of the path, you're sliding downhill. It's automatic. Yeah. So the question about resting is the essence of the meditation is always resting, not doing. Yeah, so that's important for the first question. Yeah. So I'll be bugging you guys on a regular basis. Thank you so much.
Please do.
Back into this doctor's office. I'll be listening to the rest. Thank you.
Good. Bye.
Does anybody else have things that they'd like to clarify, ask, any burning questions for us before we leave it for Drupon Khenpo tomorrow?
All right. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you all. Thank you, Lamas. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Kristen. You look so beautiful with that sunlight behind you. I love to Pat, Martha.
Oh, I get so mixed up with this. Thank you so much for your translation. It's just there. It's just
good.
I don't know what. Just it just fits so perfectly, Yeshe. You know what I mean? That it's just like you're speaking for him, and you're very, very not present, but you're nothing extra. You're just perfectly there. Beautiful.
You have no idea how happy that makes me. That's what I'm going for. Transparency.
Transparency. It shows, if that's not the right way to say it. Thank you again. Really, both of you. Incredible series. Really.
Yeah, he really is something else. I'm so glad so many people can hear him now.
Oh, I thought when Pat signed up for it, I thought that's going to be too high for me. I'm not even going to try. But then Pat couldn't take it in for various reasons. Part of it being the hearing that he has right now. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And it's just wonderful. It was really.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah, funny story. But yeah.
Lots of hugs to both of you.
Okay, thank you again.